Imagine living in a country where you were born, your parents were born, and even your grandparents were born. But the government say you don't belong. No citizenships, no protections, even no voice. Now imagine being told that this problem is just internet issues and no one outside can interfere. This is not movie. This is happening right now in ASEAN. Assalamualaikum. My name is Zubaida Ataba. Today, my teammate and I are going to talk about nation-state violent conflict in the ASEAN regions. ASEAN is often described as peaceful, cooperative, and united. But behind this image, several ASEAN countries are struggling with violent internal conflict that have lasted for years and even decades. So, the real question is not whether ASEAN's conflicts, but why nation-states in ASEAN are unable to stop them. States sound powerful. It means that states controls its lands, its people, and its law. In simple terms, a nation-state is supposed to say, if you live here, you belong here. But what happens when the state decides that some people belong more than others? That's where the problems begin. Violent conflict is not just war between countries. In ASEAN, most violence happens inside the country itself. When people feel ignored, suppressed or excluded for so long that violence becomes the only way to be heard. This violence doesn't appear overnight. It grows slowly from anger, fear, and injustice. ASEAN follows a strict rules called non-interference. This means member states do not step into each other's internal problems. So, when violence affects thousands of civilians, it often remains domestic issues, not a regional one. Today, we agree that violent conflict in ASEAN is not mainly caused by the outsiders. It's come from inside nation-state itself, from identity problems, exclusions of minority, and weak of unfair governance. By looking at the Rohingya in Myanmar, Sultan Thailand, and Mindanao in the Philippines, we will show how, when a nation-state fails to include all its peoples, violence becomes the result. Let's start by looking at the main cause of this conflict.
Asia is one of the most diverse regions in the world, with many ethnic, group, religions, and culture living within the same state. Most Asian countries are multi-ethnic and multi-religious societies. However, diversity alone does not cause violent conflict. Conflict usually happens when the nation-state fails to manage this diversity in a fair and inclusive way. In many Asian countries, national identity is often defined based on the culture, language, or religion of the majority group. When minorities do not fit into this national identity, they may be excluded from political participations and social recognitions. Over time, these groups may feel that they do not truly belong to the state, even they have lived there for generations. This sense of exclusion creates frustrations and resentment towards the government. Another key cause of the violent conflict is the marginalizations of minority groups. Marginalizations means denying minorities basic rights, political representations, and equal access to economic opportunities. When minorities communities are excluded from decision making and their voices are ignored, peaceful ways to express grievance become limited. As a result, some groups may turn to violence as a way to resist state authority or demand recognitions. These causes can be clearly seen in Asian conflict, such as cases in Myanmar. The Rohingya are a Muslim minority living in Rakhine state. They were denied citizenship under the 1982 citizenship law, which left them stateless and excluded from legal and political protection. These long-term marginalizations contribute to violent conflict. Similarly, Similarly, in southern Thailand, the Malay Muslim minority in the Patani region has faced cultural suppressions and limited political autonomy under a centralized Thai nationalist system. In both cases, ethnic and religious differences combined with systematic exclusions created conditions that lead to violence. In conclusion, violent conflict in Asia is not caused by diversity itself, but how the nation state excludes and marginalizes minority groups. Next, Person 3 will discuss how weak governance, historical and grievance and economic inequality further contribute to violent conflict in the region. Thank you. That's all from me.
My name is Nourish and I'm here to continue on what the previous person shared about ethnic tensions in Asean. Over the next few minutes, I'll be showing you the systemic flaws that fuel into this wars. The first one is where the government is weak. The second one is the problem of colonial border, and the last one, the engine driven by the economic inequality. Now, let's start with the first factor, the weak governance and state control. A nation state is supposed to be strong no matter in the capital city or the remote areas of the country. But in many ASEAN countries, power and resources are heavily concentrated only in the capital city. The central government's control often fades away the further you get from the center. They often don't have the resources or the interest to fully manage these distant regions. This lack of presence has created a security and justice vacuum. As a result, the chaos steps in. Insurgent groups, warlords and rebels try to take control. They challenge the government and suddenly you have a full-blown internal conflict war happen. The second flaw is rooted in history, which is colonial borders. A long time ago, the European powers like Britain, France and Netherlands drew up the maps for this nation. They practiced a form of political indifference. They drew lines that completely ignore existing ethnic and cultural identities. Thus, they forced many different ethnic and religious groups who didn't get along into a single country. And today, we are still dealing with the consequences of those mistakes. These modern states are built on fault lines that the colonial powers acts ignored. Lastly, let's talk about economic inequality. Imagine a country where the capital city is booming and rich, but the conflict zones, which is the places where the minority groups live, are the poorest, with bad roads, few jobs, and poor schools. This sparks the anger because when people are not only treated as second-class citizens, but are also denied a fair share of the national wealth. Those minority areas often receive less funding for schools, healthcare and infrastructure compared to the majority areas. This proves to the locals that the nation states doesn't value them. This inequality provides the fuel for the rebellion. In conclusion, the conflict in ASEAN is not just a random explosions. They are a result of a state that fails to govern, a historical errors and a massive economic unfairness.
For this example, I will talk about the Rohingya situations in Myanmar. First, who are the Rohingya? The Rohingya are Muslim minority group that living mainly in Rakhine State in western Myanmar. Even though they have lived there for a long time, the Myanmar government does not recognize them as citizens. Second, why did the conflict happen? One main reason is citizenship denial. Under the 1892 citizenship law, the Rohingya were not recognized as citizens. Because of this, they become stateless and were denied basic rights such as education, healthcare, and freedom of movement. Another reason is military operations. In 2016 and 2017, the Myanmar military carried out operations in Rakhine State. Of many Rohingya, civilians were affected, that leading to violence. Third, what forms of violence happened? There were village burnings and destructions of homes. Many Rohingya were forced to flee their village, that causing forced displacement. Fourth, what were the impact? The conflict caused a serious refugee crisis. More than 700,000 Rohingya fled to Bangladesh, that mainly to Cox's Bazar. This also became a regional security concern, as neighboring countries face humanitarian and political challenges. In conclusion, this example shows that when a nation-state refuses to recognize and protect minority groups, it can lead to violence, displacement, and serious humanitarian suffering. The Rohingya situation reminds us that citizenship and equal rights are important for peace and stability. If minority groups are excluded, conflict can grow and affect neighboring countries and regional security. Therefore, recognizing and protecting minorities is essential to prevent future conflict.
Today, I will briefly explain the conflict in southern Thailand, particularly in the Patani region. First, the background. The conflict occurred in the southern province of Patani, Yala, and Ratiwan. This area is mainly inhabited by a Malay Muslim minority with its own language, culture, and Islamic tradition. Historically, Patani was an independent Malay sultanate before becoming part of Thailand, which created a strong local identity different from mainstream Thai society. Next, the causes of the conflict. One key cause is cultural suppression. The Thai government promoted the Thai language and a unified national culture, while the Malay language and Islamic identity were often marginalized. Another cause is centralized Thai nationalism, which emphasizes a single national identity. This made many Malay Muslims feel excluded, politically ignored, and unfairly treated by the central government. Now, the nature of the violence. The conflict takes the form of an insurgency. Separatist groups mainly target security forces such as the police and military, thus shooting and bomb attacks. These actions are aimed at resisting state control and demanding greater autonomy. Finally, the impact. The conflict has led to long-term instability in southern Thailand, causing loss of life, fear among civilians, economic destruction, and deep mistrust between the local population and the government. In conclusion, this conflict shows that when national identity excluded minority identity, tension and violence can emerge. Lasting peace cannot be achieved through military force alone. It requires inclusive governance, respect for culture and religious diversity, and meaningful political dialogue. By recognizing minority identity and addressing historical grievances, state can reduce conflict and promote long-term stability.
Hello everyone, I'm Nadia Zulkifli. I'll be discussing the case of Mindanao in the southern Philippines, a long-running example of how nation-state building and violent conflict can interact in the Asean region. Let's begin with some background. For centuries, Mindanao has been home to the Moro Muslim, a culturally distinct group for their own traditions, identity, and political institutions. They lived relatively autonomously before Spanish and American colonial rule, and even after the formation of the Philippine nation-state. The Moro continue to see themselves as a separate community with a unique historical identity. The conflict in Mindanao did not emerge suddenly. Two major factors contributed significantly. First, land loss. During the 20th centuries, large wave of Christian settlers from northern Philippines moved into Mindanao. As a result, many Moro communities lost ancestral lands either through governmental resettlement programs or unfair land titling system. This created a deep sense of dispossessions and marginalizations. Second, economic neglect. Despite Mindanao's rich natural resources, Moro majorities areas remain some of the poorest in the country. Limited infrastructure, weak social services, and few economic opportunities felt frustrations. Many Moro felt that the central government benefits from Mindanao resources while the communities stay underdeveloped. This condition created fertile grounds for resistant movements demanding autonomy or even independence. These grievances eventually led to armed clashes between Moro groups and the Philippine government, especially during the 1970s onward. Rebel organizations like the Moro National Liberation Front (MNLF) and later the Moro Islamic Liberation Front (MILF) fought for political self-determinations. The conflict causes thousands of deaths and repeated cycle of displacement for civilians. For decades, Mindanao was known as one of Southeast Asia's most protracted internal conflict. Despite the long history of violence, major peace efforts have produced meaningful progress. In 2014, the Philippine government and the MILF signed the Comprehensive Agreement on the Bangsamoro, a landmark peace deal that aimed to address decades of conflict through political and economic reforms. This agreement eventually led to the creation of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao (BARMM) in 2019. BARMM gives Moro communities greater self-governance, control over local resources, and representation in political decision-making. While challenge remains, the peace process has significantly reduced large-scale violence and opened new opportunities for development. Last but not least, the key lesson from the Mindanao case is inclusive governance where diverse communities are respected, represented, and given real political power can reduce violent conflict. By addressing historical injustice and giving people a voice in how they are governed, long-standing tension can begin to ease. Thank you.